Welcome to Life Stories. Let me ask you something. What would you do if the first real hug your child ever gave wasn't to you? Today's story begins in a dusty roadside cafe with a billionaire father, a silent child, and a waitress who had no idea she was about to change their lives forever. It's a story not about grand gestures, but about presence, about the quiet, unseen moments that shape us, and about how sometimes the most powerful healing doesn't come from doctors or therapy, but from someone who simply knows how to be there. If you've ever believed that love doesn't always come with words, that trust can be earned in silence, and that one small act of kindness can break through years of distance, then this story is for you. Subscribe now to begin today's journey with Life Stories. You won't want to miss what happens next. The breakfast crowd had just cleared out when sunlight broke through the windows of Rosie's cafe, casting a soft golden glow on the chipped tables and checkered floor. The place was quiet now, almost reverent, as if it knew something important was about to happen. Jack Whitmore sat alone in the booth by the window. A crisp white shirt hugged his stiff posture, sleeves neatly rolled to just below the elbow. His hair, streaked with silver, was combed back like he still had meetings to attend, even though he hadn't set foot in a boardroom in over a year. Across from him sat a boy, 6 years old, small, pale. A mop of blonde curls flopped over his eyes. Ethan Whitmore looked like any other child, until you watched closely. He never spoke, never moved. He clung to the edge of the table with both hands, fingers twitching slightly, as though he were bracing for something only he could hear. He hadn't touched the blueberry muffin in front of him. The other patrons glanced their way, just long enough to wonder what a billionaire like Jack Whitmore was doing in a roadside diner in Ashton Falls, Oregon, a town most people drove through without ever stopping. But Jack didn't notice. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's why he chose this place. It was the kind of spot where nobody asked questions, until today. Rachel Monroe, the waitress on shift, noticed the boy the moment she rounded the corner. Not because he was Jack Whitmore's son, though that fact alone could have made headlines, but because of the way the boy's shoulders were locked up near his ears, like he was afraid the world might suddenly collapse on top of him. Rachel didn't approach the way others did. No wide-eyed gasps, no pitying stares. She simply walked over with a soft step and a steadier gaze. "Hi there," she said gently, crouching just enough to be on the boy's level without invading his space. "Would warm milk feel better than juice today?" Ethan didn't answer, but he looked at her, just for a second. And in Rachel's experience, that single glance meant everything. Then came the crash. A plate shattered in the kitchen, ceramic on tile, sharp and violent, and the boy flinched so hard his knees hit the table. His breath stuttered. His hands slapped over his ears. His entire body shook like a storm was happening inside him. Jack reached out instinctively. "Ethan, hey, it's okay. It's just a plate." But Ethan wasn't hearing him. Not really. Every sound in the cafe seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air. All eyes turned to the corner booth where a billionaire sat helplessly across from his son, unable to bridge the impossible distance between them. Then Rachel did something no one expected. She stepped out from behind the counter and slowly knelt on the floor. Not close, but not too far. She didn't speak, didn't reach. She simply opened her arms, palms up. An invitation. The boy stared at her. And then, without a word, he slid from the booth, walked slowly to her, and folded himself into her arms. No one breathed. Not Jack. Not the cook who had dropped the plate. Not the elderly couple who had been arguing about pancakes moments before. For 6 long years, Ethan Whitmore had never let anyone hold him. Not doctors, not therapists, not even his father. Until now. Jack's hand hung motionless over the table, still reaching. The next morning, Rachel was wiping down the counter when she saw him again. Same stiff posture, same pristine shirt. But something in his face had changed. He didn't walk in like a man tolerating the presence of others. He walked in like someone searching for something he didn't believe he deserved. He waited until the last customers had left before approaching. "I wanted to thank you," he said, voice rough like it hadn't been used much lately. For what you did yesterday. Rachel glanced up, unsure how to respond. He's not like other children, Jack continued. He screams when doctors check his heartbeat, won't sit beside his therapists. But yesterday, his voice trailed. He walked across a room. He hugged you. Rachel nodded slowly. Sometimes, she said, kids just know when someone isn't trying to fix them. Jack hesitated, then reached into his coat and handed her a business card. I don't know what you do outside of here, but I was hoping maybe you'd spend some time with him. Talk, or don't. Sit, read, whatever works. She looked at the card, but didn't take it. I'd pay you, of course, he added, as if embarrassed to say it out loud. Rachel wasn't thinking about money. She was thinking about how Ethan had melted into her, how his breathing had slowed, how, for one moment, he had felt safe. I'll think about it, she said, placing the card by the napkin dispenser. Jack nodded and turned to leave. But then he paused, fumbled in his pocket. I found this, he said quietly. In the back seat. I think it's meant for you. He handed her a small folded paper. Rachel opened it. 2 stick figures, arms outstretched, a red crayon heart between them. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. Rachel stared at the drawing for a long time. And when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than it had been in months. Tell him, she said, I'd love to come by. Just for a little while. Jack nodded again. But this time, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not gratitude, not relief. Hope. When was the last time someone made you feel safe just by being there? Do you believe a simple gesture, like a hug, can change a life? Stay with us as we continue this journey in part 2. What Rachel finds next, no one could have expected. Rachel didn't show up with a clipboard or a list of therapeutic goals. She didn't bring puzzles or behavioral plans or child development books. What she did bring was a worn canvas tote filled with picture books, a tin of colored pencils, and a quiet energy that wrapped around the edges of a room like a soft blanket. Jack had cleared out the sunroom in his estate, removed the leather-bound books and angular furniture, replaced them with floor pillows, low tables, and shelves filled with children's stories. The windows overlooked the hills outside Ashton Falls, but inside, it was Rachel who created the view that mattered. Ethan didn't speak on the first day, or the second, but he sat on the same pillow every time, legs crossed, eyes fixed on the pictures Rachel drew. Stick animals with lopsided smiles, birds with rainbow feathers, turtles wearing rain boots. Sometimes he'd take a crayon and add something, a second sun, a scribbled star, a swirl that made sense only to him. Rachel never commented unless he wanted her to. She never asked why. She simply nodded and kept drawing, her presence steady and unshakable. When Ethan grew anxious, at the sound of a passing truck or a dog barking outside, he'd freeze, hands clutching at his sleeves. Rachel would pause whatever she was doing and whisper, "If you feel scared, you can hug me." Or, "Let me hug you." "Only if you want." He rarely responded, but the offer was always there, like a lighthouse blinking across the water. Jack watched from the hallway more often than he'd admit. At first, it was out of caution, making sure things stayed appropriate, professional. But soon, he realized he wasn't watching Rachel. He was watching his son. He noticed things. Ethan's hands, once clenched, now rested open in his lap. His eyes didn't dart as much. His shoulders didn't live quite so high up near his ears. And when Rachel laughed, a low, musical sound that filled the room, Ethan's lips curled slightly at the edges, like his body remembered how to smile, even if his voice hadn't caught up yet. One afternoon, Jack stepped in with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. Ethan was lying on his stomach, drawing a purple house with no door. Jack hesitated. "Can I sit?" Ethan didn't look up, but he didn't say no either. Jack sat beside Rachel, unsure what to say. He watched as she colored a tree upside down, deliberately, ridiculously, and Ethan corrected her by flipping the page. It was the closest thing to a laugh Jack had ever heard from his son. Rachel smiled. "You okay with cocoa, kiddo?" Ethan gave a tiny nod. Jack held his breath. Progress, he thought. A moment. But he didn't say it out loud. That night, as Jack closed his office, he saw Rachel's tote bag still sitting near the door. Before he could call after her, he spotted something peeking from the top. A drawing. Two stick figures again, this time on a hill, holding hands under a yellow sun. One figure had silver streaks in the hair. The other had curls. In the corner, a third figure stood nearby, arms open. Jack's hand trembled as he returned the paper to the bag. The next day, everything shifted. The photo hit the internet at 8:13 a.m. A grainy image taken through the cafe window. Ethan, wrapped around Rachel's waist, his face buried in her sweater. Jack, just behind them, eyes wide, frozen mid-step. The headline was cruel and insinuating. Billionaire's son clings to waitress, morning cuddle, or something more? By lunchtime, it had been shared to over 30 gossip sites. Afternoon talk shows picked it up, speculating on boundaries, whispering about Jack's judgment. His assistant texted twice. "You need to get ahead of this." He didn't open the articles. He stared at the photo, at Ethan's little body pressed close to the one person he trusted. He didn't think. He reacted. By 3 p.m., Rachel had received the message from the cafe manager. "Mr. Whitmore says the arrangement is over. No contact, no explanation." She didn't cry. She didn't call. Instead, she sat in the break room, unfolded the drawing Ethan had given her, and ran her fingers over the red crayon heart. She understood. Jack had believed the worst, without asking, without knowing. Again. That night, Jack walked past Ethan's room and saw the soft glow of the nightlight beneath the door. He knocked once, opened it quietly. Ethan lay curled around a pillow, clinging to it like it could hug him back. Jack sat on the edge of the bed. "This one's not warm," Ethan whispered. "Not like her." The words struck deeper than Jack was prepared for. He didn't speak, didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, the silence between them no longer empty, but aching. What do you think? Can a single act of trust be more powerful than years of therapy? Join us next time as Jack discovers the truth behind the photo and what it will cost him to try and make things right. It took 4 days for the truth to surface, 4 long, echoing days. Jack sat in his office, blinds half drawn, untouched coffee cooling beside a stack of reports he hadn't read. When his chief of security stepped in, holding a printed file, Jack already knew what was inside. "It wasn't her," the man said simply. The photo had been taken by a tourist, a stranger passing through Ashton Falls, seated at a corner table at Rosie's Cafe. He'd snapped it without permission, posted it for attention, and walked away, never understanding what he had captured. No leaks, no betrayal, just carelessness. Jack stared at the report, hands still. Rachel hadn't sold them out. She hadn't exposed Ethan's most vulnerable moment. She had simply held it, and he had thrown her away without a word. That evening, he knocked on Ethan's door again. The boy was quieter than usual. He hadn't touched his crayons in days, didn't wait by the window, didn't hum. "Story?" Jack asked, holding up a book. Ethan shrugged, eyes blank. They sat side by side on the floor, the book unopened. Jack glanced down and saw Ethan clutching the hem of his own shirt, his version of holding on. "I was wrong," Jack whispered. "About her." Ethan didn't move, but he blinked, once, slowly. "I let fear speak louder than truth." Still no response. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Jack opened the drawer beside his bed. Inside was the drawing, the stick figures, the heart tack, the sunlight. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, the community library was calm and bright. Parents with toddlers shuffled between shelves, retirees flipped through magazines, and in the back corner on a faded beanbag, Rachel Monroe sat reading aloud. Her voice was low, warm. The children around her leaned in, listening as though the story were a secret made just for them. Jack waited until the story ended, until the juice boxes were handed out and the toddlers wandered off in search of stickers. Then he stepped forward. Rachel looked up. Her expression shifted. Confusion, hesitation, recognition, but no anger. "I'm sorry," Jack said, his voice quieter than the room. "I believed something I shouldn't have. I didn't ask. I didn't trust. I just reacted." He took a breath. "I'm the richest father I know," he continued, "but I wasn't rich enough to teach my son how to hug someone, or how to let someone hug him back." Rachel didn't speak, but her eyes softened. That was enough. Weeks passed, and something new began to grow. Jack and Rachel didn't return to what they had before. They built something else, slowly, carefully. Together, they launched a small nonprofit. They called it The First Hug. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't about checklists or diagnoses. It was presence, patience, a safe space for kids like Ethan to learn connection, not by force, but by invitation. The launch event was held in the courtyard of the Ashton Falls Community Center. No speeches, no cameras, just soft music, warm blankets on the grass, and storytime circles under the trees. Ethan stood beside Rachel, clutching the hem of her cardigan. When she knelt to talk to another child, he leaned forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. The crowd fell silent. Then, slowly, Ethan turned toward Jack. He didn't speak, didn't rush. He raised his arms, palms open, a silent invitation. Jack stepped forward, knelt, and for the first time, truly, he hugged his son. No stiffness, no hesitation, just warmth, just love, and the quiet, steady realization that the most priceless moments in life are the ones money can never buy. How did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of someone in your own life who just needed to be seen, not fixed? If this story touched something in you, comment 100 below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. And please, share this video with someone who believes in the quiet power of presence. We'll see you next time.